So, as someone who has gone through his own winding journey from stuttering to fluency, I want to show you why I believe there is one and only one reliable cure for stuttering. That might sound like an insanely bold claim, but it'll all make sense here in a second. And if you're a returning viewer, then you already know that I'm not going to say some BS about, oh, it's this program or it's my method or it's this particular technique that I teach that is the cure and it's the only one. No, none of that. Of course not. So let's get that out of the way. This isn't about any device or medication or new technique that I came up with. Instead, here's what I'm actually talking about. Remember that scene in The Lion King when Simba is walking through the woods and he's going through his whole sad boy hours and he was just very droopingly and just very sadly walking through the woods, and Rafiki finds him and he leads Simba down to the lake where Simba sees his reflection in the water. And what does Rafiki say to him in reference to Mufasa, Simba's dead father? Rafiki tells him,
"You see? He lives in you."
I think you know where I'm going with this. The cure for stuttering is not out there in the ether somewhere that you just need to go find. No. The only reliable place you will ever find a cure is within yourself. The cure lives in you. Scientists from all over the world have been trying for decades to come up with an external solution to the problem of stuttering. And they've always failed. And they've sometimes failed miserably. Sometimes the failure was not that bad, like minimal success, where you get maybe some meds that can help people a little bit, some like a feedback device that might help a person at least for a while. But these are far from being profound, life-changing. They don't even get close to being some cure. Now, I'm not suggesting that that won't change ever. I'm relatively optimistic about the future of especially with the advancement of AI, the potential ability to rewire the brain from the outside in a very reliable way. I think it's very possible that we could be on the verge here in the next, couple decades of something really profoundly amazing that can actually be the best treatment for stuttering that we've ever had. But the brain is profoundly complex and everything is connected to everything else. And so it would take a profoundly complex system or drug or AI generated treatment to really make the changes that we're talking about. But anyway, back to the main point. The cure lives in you. Now, what does this mean? Let's expand on this. I want to walk you through, I'm going to give you what I'm going to call the 6 keys to unlocking this cure that already lives within you. So that's the premise. It's already there. We just need to find it. It's like Simba. It's what Rafiki tells him. Your father lives through you. Your father lives in you. Now, I quickly want to make something clear about these 6 keys I'm about to show you. And that is that you don't need to ace all of these to see growth or to see improvement with your speech. This video isn't about little improvements here and there. This isn't about managing your speech to be a little bit better. I have plenty of videos where I talk about tools and techniques that are very helpful, that are a part of this overall process. But today, I want to go a little deeper. I want to talk to those of you who have the mindset of mastery, who have the mindset of just wanting to go all in. I'm talking to those of you who want to discover the edges of your potential, who want to figure out who they are at their very best. All right? So let's go ahead. Let's look at these 6 keys to unlocking the cure that lives within you. Key number 1, you need to open yourself up to pain. Your potential transformation with your speech really hinges on whether you are willing to be vulnerable or not. If you don't have a willingness to deal with pain, to actually look at the wounds and to even open the wounds, and to no longer just put band-aids over them, but to actually address those wounds. If you are not willing to go through some pain in this process, you're just not going to reach the top level of speech fluency that you might want. And I had to make this choice, and I would say I made it in multiple stages, but there was the first real big moment when I made that decision was when I was 19 years old. And that was when I really started to explore. I looked online, tried to figure out, okay, what are my options here? How can I possibly improve my speech, not have to deal with this annoying stutter? And through that entire process, I ended up enrolling in a very good program, and that helped charge me. That helped give me a system and a plan that I had never had before. But underneath it all was just that choice to, okay, I am willing to be vulnerable here. I'm going to make this step. I'm going to commit myself to this plan. And now looking back, almost 10 years later, I cannot tell you how grateful I am that I made that proactive choice. I wasn't passive. I didn't just sit around and hope for the best. I actually did something about it. And I looked it directly in the eyes, and I was willing. And I don't know how I mustered it up in my, completely immature 19-year-old state. Somehow I managed to do at least that part right, where I looked at the wounds and I was willing to open them and give them an actual chance to heal and to actually address the situation. Now, a big part of opening yourself to pain is having the courage to be a fool. And I'm using that word fool in the way that Carl Jung used the word fool. And he has a quote, he has a thought from, I believe this is from his book called The Psychology of the Unconscious, where he says that the fool is the precursor to the savior. So in Jungian psychology, the fool is not some idiot. Rather, the fool is someone who is willing to risk failure and someone who is willing to be seen as imperfect, both by himself, so willing to you could say, diminish his ego and to be willing to be seen as imperfect, but also to be willing to be seen as imperfect by others. And you could say, if you really took this to an extreme, visually, you could say it's a person who's willing to be seen bleeding. It's having the courage to be a fool. And any time that you undertake a new challenge or you try to learn a new complex skill, this is what you're doing. And this is why we're so resistant. This is why it's so hard to, or in part, why it's so hard to learn a new language and then to try to speak it in a country that speaks that language. Or if you try to learn to play piano, you look like a fool. But you need to go through that, and you need to be willing and have that courage to be a fool, because that's the only way to really get to the steps beyond that. That is a step that you cannot get over. You have to go through that process of being willing and having that courage. So that is key number 1. Open yourself to pain. Now, key number 2, in order to unlock the fluency that lives within you, is you need to shine a light into the shadows. Now, this second key, this kind of thing is often overlooked because it doesn't have obvious or immediate connection to your speech habits, to stuttering or fluency. But as you'll see, it actually connects a lot more with your speech habits than you might think. So what do I mean by shine a light into the shadows? Well, I'm talking about confronting your wounds, opening yourself to pain like we just talked about. But going even deeper, like confronting your repression, confronting your dark side. This is about shining a light into the shadows of your psyche. It's important to remember here that you cannot fix speech on its own. Your speech does not live on an island. It is connected to everything else. And so if you don't take a holistic approach to your speech, then you are just not going to get the kind of healing that you want. You might get some improvements here or there. You might come across a technique or a tool that's useful. But if you're talking grand scale change and really powerful transformations, then you need to be willing to go through these deeper stages where you really focus on healing your entire psyche and not just the speech part of it. Now, this looks completely different depending on who you are and what your needs are and what works for you. So for some, this might include a bit of one-on-one psychotherapy. For some, it might include spiritual practices. For some, it might be things like meditation and breath work, things like that. Or for some, perhaps a more controversial path would be really useful, such as psychedelic therapy. Now, I'll share a quick glimpse again into my own life and an example of how this applied to me. So when I was 24 years old, so this is about 5 years ago now, that was one of the most, if not the most pivotal year of my life, at least since becoming an adult. So there were just multiple things that happened when I was 24 that just profoundly changed the trajectory of my life. And one of them was, I moved to a new state. I just decided to just move because I just felt like I needed to. And that started a whole cascade of events from there. And one of the events that followed is, I guess you could call it a spiritual awakening or a holistic awakening. I just reached this point where I started to confront and actually question some of the things that I had just taken for granted, or the things that I had been instilled in me from the time I was a very young child all the way through my teenage years. And for the first time when I was 24, I actually really looked in the mirror. I actually started to think about things in a deeper way and try to disconnect from my own personal biases because of everything that got put in me from the people that I just happened to be around. So there was a bit of an awakening there, and I feel like a lot of healing happened. And of course, it wasn't. In the moment, it didn't maybe feel quite as profound, but what the cascade that started to then from 24 to now, and I'm on almost 29, I'm so grateful for that time. Now, one of the things I'll mention too about age 24 is I don't think it's a coincidence that this was also the time period where my speech really spiked and I reached a new level of just consistent smoothness, a new level of mastery I had never reached before. So I started my speech journey with my first real plan when I was 19, but it wasn't until I was 24 when I really hit that new peak. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the kind of confronting, the being able to open the wounds of my childhood and the things I had been taught and being able to actually approach it. And it's a very challenging thing to do that. And to get some of that healing from that, I think that absolutely spilled over into my speech because I shined a light into some of the shadows of my own psyche. So once again, to stick with the theme here, you will not find the cure to your speech troubles out there. Oh, is it this pill? Oh, is it this med? Oh, is it this device? There's a very, very little chance that you're going to find it in any of those external places. You got to go in. You got to go inward. You can find it there. It's way more difficult and way more challenging and takes way more patience. But that's the only reliable place to go. So shine a light into those shadows, face your demons, try to work through any childhood traumas. And I think we almost all have childhood trauma. And I'm usually pretty broad with that because you're so sensitive as a child that I'm using that term very broadly. So anything from very extreme to what some people might not even call childhood trauma, but just trying to heal from any wounds that you have from childhood, and we all have them. And even just maybe your teenage years, and try to just actually confront your past and stare into the shadows again. This can be a very challenging process, and as I touched on, everybody has a different journey here. So it's not like, oh, you have to go to therapy in this way and have this kind of approach. Everybody's different. So then that'll take time for you to figure out. It took me time to figure things out. It's still taking me time. It's still taking me a lot of time. I got so many issues still that I'm dealing with. And so, but I also know that I've healed a lot, and that's a really beautiful thing. And so just start small. If you don't know where to look, just start small. Maybe get out of the house, just go for a walk. Just start very small and look, maybe do some journaling, do some writing, maybe actually pick up a book that looks interesting and start reading it. Try to do just one small thing that can give you a little bit of energy, that can get you one step closer to building up that willingness, that courage to where you can start to shine a light into those shadows. It's really powerful. It's a necessary step on this road to mastery. Now, key number 3 is you need to paint a clear picture of your desired future. I think one of the most important things any of us can learn is to just get a taste of how little control we have and how much of an illusion it is of the ideas like the self-made man, or this isn't a full-on argument, against free will, but it's a little bit of that, a little bit of like a lot of that is illusion. A lot of the choices we make and the kind of things that we do, we because of our ego and the way that we're wired and the way that we grow, we tend to put more weight on, oh, this was my choice because I chose to do it. I'm strong. I have the will, power, and I just made it happen. So we tend to give too much credence to that and not enough to chance, to fortune, to luck, and the like. And the reason I bring this up is because I want to talk about it in the context of motivation. So what you need to understand about motivation is not a willpower thing. You have some people that might tell themselves or tell you that I'm just not a motivated person. It's just my nature. I'm not very motivated. But that's never actually true. Sure, some of us tend to be a little bit more conscientious than others by nature. But on a more just basic level of motivation, again, it's not a willpower thing. You don't need willpower to be motivated. You just need the right cues, and motivation will naturally come. As an example, you might be the most chill person in the world, the quintessential cocktails at 2, chilling, laying on the beach all day, relaxing, not putting in a bunch of effort, just chilling and having a good time. And you don't really want to exert yourself or do any crazy hard workouts. You're just trying to chill, enjoy your life, right? And maybe that's kind of your personality. But if you have a kid and one of them falls off their bike and scrapes their knee, you sure as hell are gonna spring up from your beach chair and go and attend to them. Not because you're this grand motivated person. No, it's because you acted out of necessity. You acted out of feelings of love and care towards something or somebody. What's my point here? It's that we have to recognize this about our nature as human beings when it comes to motivation, which is without necessity, you ain't ever changing anything. So if you want to really change your speech, this is what this means, then you need to make it feel like it's a real necessity. Otherwise, you won't have the motivation. This is how motivation works. If you don't have powerful and heartfelt reasons for wanting a life of fluency, then you're never going to reach it. Not if we're talking about transformation and mastery and becoming a different person almost. That kind of change requires going with the grain of human nature and making sure that you understand it as a necessity, not as an option, not as maybe it would be nice, so I'll kind of work my way. No, you got to view it as a necessity. So again, what we're dealing with here, this is not about willpower. You don't need more willpower. You need incentive. You need clear reasons that you understand, that you feel strongly about. So paint the picture of the future you want. What do you want? What kind of person? What kind of speaker? What is the outflow of that? What does that look like? Paint the picture of your desired future. You can have it. It's within your potential. But you need to remove the blurriness. You got to unblur it. Make it clear. Paint that picture clearly in your mind. Even better, write it down. And as that image unblurs, you will find the motivation start to stir, because that unblurred, that clear image that is now crystallizing starts to feel more and more like a necessity. You start to treat it as, oh, I love the idea of that. I care about this future person. Just like the example I gave earlier, you care about the kid. So even if you feel completely demotivated, you're gonna jump up and go take care of them and tend to them if they fell off their bike. Same thing with yourself. When you can clearly see this future version of you that you want to become, you start to love and care about that person. And you start to act out of necessity. And there's a lot of power within that you can harness. And that's where you get your motivation. Speaking of motivating yourself into action, if you want to go beyond what you're watching in this video and you want to get an actual plan and system in place, then I got you covered. It's my free Stop Stuttering workshop. Link is in the description if you're on YouTube. You can also find it at speakyourmindmethod.com. If you have not watched it, go and enjoy. It's an over an hour long workshop. It walks you through so much good stuff, gives you tools, gives you techniques, gives you a plan, a daily routine, a system, and it's 100% free. So you've got nothing to lose. Link again in the description. It's at speakyourmindmethod.com. So be sure to go check it out. Moving on to key number 4 for unlocking the cure that lives in you is you need to find a villain to defeat. So staying in the spirit of working with ourselves, going with the grain of human nature, not against it, like we just talked about with motivation in the last key. It can be a deal breaker whether or not you have a villain to go against. From the time we were kids, we all understood this, that every great story needs a hero to root for and a villain to root against. The Lion King would not have the same impact if you didn't have the villain of Scar in it. Same in Harry Potter, you need Voldemort to root against. In The Lord of the Rings, you need Sauron to root against. And in a show like Breaking Bad, you need, everyone to root against. But of course, on your speech journey, it's not quite as obvious. The villains aren't quite as clear. And so let's try to unblur that. Let's try to make it very clear as to what are a couple options for you that could take the place as the villain as you continue with your speech journey. So I want to give you 3 examples of villains, of potential villains that you could adopt as the thing or the idea that you go against, or the future that you go against would be another way of putting it. And on that note, the first example of a villain you could adopt is future isolation and loneliness. So within this future version of you that is potential of perhaps feeling isolated, lonely, maybe worse than you even feel now. This is very common among stutterers or non-stutterers, right? Especially in this day and age, as great as a lot of the things we have, there is an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And so what if that gets even worse, right? And within this kind of isolation and loneliness, part of that is very often influenced by the stuttering in a particular way, too, in that it's a general feeling of never being understood, right? Of kind of feeling like nobody ever gets you because you feel like you aren't able to express yourself efficiently, verbally. And so you kind of feel isolated as a result of that. So this can be a very effective villain. It's like a future version of you that is very isolated, very lonely. And so having that as an outcome that you really don't want, an outcome to run from or to push against, can be a really powerful motivator. Again, we're staying in this theme of going with the grain of human nature. And if any of the stories or movies you've ever watched have told you anything about human nature, you know that villains are kind of necessary. And so this can be one. Another potential villain is missed opportunities. So you could say a life of perpetual avoidance, where you maybe just don't have the confidence. You don't develop that confidence to learn skills, to pursue lucrative jobs. And maybe one of the missed opportunities is completely removing yourself from the dating pool because it's just so stressful, and trying to talk to people becomes just so difficult that you just decided that you don't want to deal with it anymore. That's a missed opportunity, potentially connected to your speech. So missed opportunity is another example. Finally, the third example of a villain I want to run by you here is, and this kind of encapsulates everything. You could put the first two within this third one. So this is more of a broad one, and it is a life of invisibility. So this could be a villain in your mind that you push back against. So what do I mean by this? Well, this is kind of, again, it's more of an umbrella villain here that encapsulates missed opportunities, future isolation, and loneliness. But we could even expand this to feelings of low status, right? Feelings of powerlessness, like you have no influence in your life, and you feel like you don't have the power to actually influence other people, or to just actually have some outlet for that natural impulse of wanting to have some influence and power in our lives, wanting to have some control. And when you feel that you don't have that at all, then it can be a very depressing existence. That's just the truth of it. And so a life of invisibility could very much come into play too with like career invisibility, romantic invisibility, or otherwise. It's just that feeling of being low status, that feeling of not being able to have your way, that feeling of not being able to get what you want, and that feeling that nobody understands you again because you just feel kind of invisible in many different ways. And, that's an unfortunate outcome. Now, you may have felt how visceral these potential villains are, and that's on purpose. Villains need to have that visceral reaction that we like, oh man, why are we talking about this? This is kind of hard to talk about. I'm getting a little bit of frustration or maybe anger. And maybe you're feeling those stirrings of those negative emotions as I'm talking about these potential villains. But that's a good thing. That's what a villain is supposed to do. It's yet another example that you don't need more willpower. You don't need a more motivated personality. You just need to see more clearly. You need to see what you want, and you need to see what you don't want. So there you go. That's the fourth key. Find a villain to defeat. So we still got 2 more to go. Key number 5 is put your trust in neuroplasticity and your genes. Now, you might be surprised that I included the and your genes into that key because multiple times I've gone on record and I've talked about how genetics very definitively for many people seem to play a role in stuttering. Like it's basically indisputable. And from the research I've done, from what I've seen, you're just going to have a really hard time coming up with an answer that says that it's not connected to genetics. But here's the thing about genes, and I want to expand on this in a future video, but we're just going to spend a little bit of time talking about it here. Your genes are not predeterministic. Rather, your genes come with a whole range of potential outcomes. So when I say that, yes, stuttering probably has something to do with your genetics, I'm not saying that from the genetic predeterminism perspective, which has been so thoroughly debunked that it's even ridiculous that people who say they study genetics still believe in genetic predeterminism. That's not how it works. We don't come with, hey, you have the gene for this, therefore you are going to have cancer in this part of your body. It's not how it works. Now, as the field of what's called epigenetics has expanded greatly over the past couple decades, we've come to really learn a lot about how genes actually work, in that some of your genes will turn on and some of your genes will turn off depending on your environment. So the way that your genes express themselves, or which of your genes turn on or off, are heavily influenced by things like sleep, stress levels, the relationships you're in, and on and on. The environment is a very broad term. And I'll give you an example here. Let's use the example of sleep. If you're not getting enough sleep, that can cause certain genes involved in stress regulation to turn off, while other genes linked to anxiety turn on. And that then leads to a cascade of issues, such as your amygdala being more sensitive, which then leads to you being more anxious, more stressed, more reactive, less rational, which then leads to you being more likely to default to conditioned stress-based behaviors such as stuttering. So your sleep or lack thereof is a great example of how epigenetics influences your behavior and turns certain genes on and off because of those sleep patterns. But here's a really cool bright side to this. While it may be very true that there was a genetically based tendency for you to develop a stutter, do you know what is also based on your genetics? It is your ability to turn on certain genes that can activate change, that can make neuroplasticity more robust, more powerful. Neuroplasticity will not function, you will not rewire your brain without the genetic signal first. So, whenever I or anybody else says anything along the lines of your stuttering comes from your genetics or may come, at least in part, from your genetics, just know that the cure, the transformation, the change also comes from your genetics. And on neuroplasticity, there's nothing really to dispute here. We all have neuroplastic brains. We have brains that are constantly in flux based on experiences, based on the things we do in our lives, the habits we learn. You've spent your entire life strengthening some connections and weakening others based on your experiences. And you're just doing the exact same kind of process, just at a higher than average level of difficulty. It'll take a bit more patience. It's a bit more complex than just a basic skill that you might learn at work. But the nuts and bolts of it is the same. You already know what neuroplasticity feels like because you already know how it was before you started. Maybe it was your first job or the job you have now. You know what it felt like to not be good at that job and then to be good at that job. That is only possible through neuroplasticity, through your brain's ability to change in response to your experience. So you have no better friends than these two that already live within you: neuroplasticity and the genes that allow neuroplasticity to be expressed, to be maximized in the first place. And as I always say, if you never stop improving, transformation is inevitable. If you just get a little bit better than you were yesterday and you continue that for as long as you need to, you're gonna reach a point of profound change from when you started. So put your trust in neuroplasticity. Put your trust in your genes. The potential is all there, and I'll say it again, the cure lives in you. You just gotta find it. Finally, let's bring this home, shall we? I know this video has been going on for pretty long, but that's okay. We're diving into some deep stuff today, so I hope you don't mind. Key number 6 is a connection to something sacred. This is for those of you who are still watching, who really want to maximize not just their speech, but their life. So what am I talking about here when I say you want to connect to something sacred? First of all, let's define what I mean by the word sacred. The way I would define the word sacred is something that affects you in such a profound way that it cannot be explained in words. That's what I'm talking about when I say sacred. You just can't express it using language. What I love about this is how open-ended it is. So what's sacred for me can be completely different than what is sacred for you. For me, taking a walk in nature and listening to Hans Zimmer, that connects me very often to the sacred, to that, it takes me to that sublime place that I just can't really explain in words. It's a really meaningful thing for me. But yours is probably something else. Yours maybe you find your connection to the sacred in reading novels. Maybe it's with doing spiritual practices. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's taking care of plants and Maybe it's dancing. Maybe it's playing a musical instrument. Maybe it's playing an athletic sport. It can be so many different things, and that is what's so beautiful about this. Now, if you are saying to yourself something like, yeah, that's great, but I don't know what that is for me. I don't really have anything at the moment that occupies that kind of space. And if you are that person, what I will say is you just need to start exploring a little bit. And what that means is just start doing little things that are not your normal daily routines, that are not your normal habits. Because if within your daily life, you find yourself not having that connection to something sacred or sublime, then you want to mix the bag a little bit. Do something that's a little bit different than what you're used to try to just explore and see if you can come across something that just hits you in a different way. Now, I feel like I was a bit fortunate with this because when I was a young teenager, I really got into playing music. So that really started that. So quite young, I already had something that connected me to something that was sacred, something again that can't really be explained in words with how meaningful it felt to me. And so, but I know that was just luck, right? That I just happened to be fortunate to have that. And for many of us, especially in this modern context where we're constantly distracted, it tends to push out or just push to the side any of those potential connections. And so, yeah, it just might take a little bit of exploring. But when you come across something that just resonates in a special way, in a new way, in a way that you realize, oh, this is so profound that I can't explain this with words, you'll find that at some point. It might take some patience, but you'll know when you find it. So go and connect to something sacred. Don't just use a little technique to improve your speech a little bit. I want to encourage you to be someone who goes all the way, who really thinks about this process in a holistic way, who is willing to you're willing to open yourself to pain. You shine a light into the shadows. That was key number 2. You paint a clear picture of your desired future, right? You find a villain to defeat. You put your trust in your nature, in your neuroplasticity, in your genes, and you connect to something sacred. If you can score even a 5 or a 6 out of 10 in all of these, you are going to be so far ahead of basically everybody else who stutters. So this is not a perfection thing. I'm far from perfect in any of these 6 keys. But if you can just embrace all of them, maybe just take one at a time if it's a bit overwhelming, of course. But if you can just get even a little bit, if you can internalize even just a little bit these 6 keys, then you are well on your way to transforming yourself into the kind of person that you envision when you think about, oh, this is the kind of person I want to become. This is the kind of person that at my best I could be this. All things combined from this very holistic standpoint. It's just a really cool thing. So once again, my friend, the cure lives in you. It's not out there. It's not some alien that's going to drop off the cure at your front door. Go inward. Go find it within yourself. It's the only reliable place you will likely ever be able to find anything resembling a cure. Again, maybe sometime here within our lifetimes, maybe that'll change and there will be a real profound breakthrough. But I'm not betting on that. I'm not going to wait for that to come around. And even if it does come around and you've put in all the work, I don't think you're going to regret reaching a point where you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have put in all that work because now I could just go to the doctor and do this procedure and rewire my brain the way that to where I can speak fluently. But oh man, all that effort, all those meaningful steps that I went through, I really shouldn't have done that. I don't think that's going to happen. You're going to be really glad. even if there comes a cure in 20 or 30 years, you're going to be really glad that you did the work today, because it wasn't just about your speech. It was about living the life that you want and really building up your character. And so that's where I'll bring this home. Once again, go watch my free Stop Stuttering workshop. Link is in the description. It's also at speakyourmindmethod.com. That's your blueprint to get this whole process started. Gives you a bunch of techniques, tools, everything you need to get started, daily routine, all that good stuff. So go check it out. And that is where I'm going to leave you with today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.